Clapper board, you're about to hear an original HFY sci-fi tale titled The War of Silent Stars. The alien princess froze when her soulmate Mark glowed after touching a human guard. HFY story. Find a quiet spot, put on your headphones, and let the stars fall silent. If you enjoy cinematic sci-fi narrations, consider subscribing for more. Now we begin. Space forgot how to breathe. Signals thinned. Patrol songs faded. Even the beacons, the old lighthouse voices that kept freighters steady, stuttered and went still. They called it the War of Silent Stars. It was a war that didn't roar. It listened. It learned the rhythms of fear and turned them into maps. Fleets drifted in dead corridors, guns cold, crews whispering in suits just to remind themselves they were there. No one remembered the first volley. Everyone remembered the quiet. On the edge of the Peregrine Reach, a glass city clung to the hull of a dying moon. The city had a name carved into its spine, Vigil. It had been built for parades and treaties. It had learned to survive sieges. Tonight it wore both faces, emerald banners and heavy guns. A human stood at the southern airlock. He wore gray armor, the kind welded 3 times and blessed once by a mechanic with grease-stained hands. A name strip read Tomas Reyes. Scars crossed the knuckles that held his rifle. He watched the stars the way old fishermen watch the sea, not with romance, with respect. A procession approached from the shuttle bay, silver guards with hair like woven light, cloaks alive with pinpricks of bioluminescence. At their center, under a canopy that breathed, walked an alien whose step remade the hallway. She was not tall, but gravity liked her. The air paused to learn her name. Princess Selene of the Lur. Her people lived in cities grown from glass coral and sang to their ships until the metal remembered how to move. Along the veins of her wrist, beneath translucent skin, a faint constellation lay dormant. The Lur called it the Concord Mark. It flickered only once in a lifetime. It was said to glow when you touched the one who could change your fate without breaking it. The corridor hissed as atmospheres equalized. Tomas raised a hand, and his voice found its own calm. "Welcome to Vigil, Your Highness." She lifted her eyes. They were the color of deep water, the kind that showed you yourself without lying. "Thank you, human guard." Her entourage halted. Le protocol demanded distance. No one touched without intention and witness. Selene stepped forward anyway. The guns in the rafters turned polite. Tomas held out the scanner. "Palms, please, security passes. The station's jump lattice is unstable. We're all playing careful." She placed her hand on the plate. Their skin brushed. Every light in the corridor dimmed. Her wrist constellation blazed. Her guards froze. The chamber's wind died. Tomas heard his own pulse and thought of how, when storms approach the old cities, dogs grow quiet and look to the doors. Selene did not breathe for 1 beat. 2, 3. Her mouth opened a fraction, not for words, so the world could fall out and climb back in. The mark burned like a star trapped under her skin. Tomas blinked. Your hand is glowing," she whispered. "It has never done that." The Lur captain, a blade of a man named Erath, stepped forward like a judgment given legs. Princess stepped back. Selene did not. She looked at Tomas the way climbers look at a rope, checking it, trusting it, hating that trust was needed at all. She pressed her palm against the scanner again. The constellation flared. Tomas felt it in his teeth. Erath's voice, quiet, terrified, angry that it was terrified. "Human, remove your hand." Tomas did not. He had pointed rifles at kings. He had changed diapers on a freighter that had seen better suns. He listened to his gut, to the nursery of instincts humans used when maps failed. He kept his hand there. His other found the emergency bar under the plate and snapped it down. The scanner didn't chirp. It sang. The note rolled down the corridor, up the rafters, into the bones of the city. Old machines woke like cats disturbed. Far above Vigil, in a museum orbiting no one and nothing, a dormant ring opened 1 petal. It tasted the note and decided to remember. The War of Silent Stars tilted its head. Erath's blade whispered from its sheath. Your Highness, Seleni's eyes were wet and furious, with awe, with fear, with the weight of a story that had refused to be just a story. Stand down, Princess, stand down. He lowered his blade because people like him had learned when to stop. Tolmas took his hand away and the mark quieted, though it was not asleep now. It watched. What does it mean? Tolmas asked because humans asked when they didn't know, and that asking had kept them alive more than pride ever had. Selene closed her fingers, her skin visibly trying to decide whether to glow again. It means the old songs were not wrong. It means I have a choice I did not want. It means the galaxy will burn or be fed. Tolmas frowned. Fed, come, she said. If you call me your highness again, I will call you shoelaces for the rest of your life. He almost smiled. I'd salute to that. She almost smiled back. Do not. The audience chamber filled with light like water. The ceiling was glass and showed cold stars, human officers in worn blues, nobles whose jewelry was the way they breathed. Between them, a table grown from a seed that remembered being a mountain. Admiral Shirin Voss of Earth's protectorate stood. She had eyes that had watched ships burn and learned to love the ones that didn't anyway. Princess Selene, we are grateful you came. The lattice is failing. We don't know why. You said the Lure archives remember. We hope you're right. Selene placed both palms on the table. The mark woke and the wood shivered, recognizing a story older than screws. The lattice fails because someone is listening too hard. Silence used to protect us. Now it's a net. Who's listening? Tolmas asked quietly. Selene didn't look at him when she answered. She didn't have to now. The mark made them satellites of the same gravity. A regent who loves applause. His name entered the room like smoke. Calth Veyer. He was not Lure. He belonged to no one, which meant he belonged to every vacuum party that had ever learned power like a stage. He wore silence like a brand. He led a choir of engineers who taught space how to stand still for a camera. Shirin leaned forward. We have something else. She touched the panel. The air curled into shape. A recording, a derelict ring unlatching, answering a note no one had meant to sing. Our ears on the outer rec lines heard that a few minutes ago it responded to something on the station. Tolmas lowered his eyes. Selene did not. My mark, she said. Shirin's mouth flattened. And the human. She didn't make it an accusation. She made it a map. Tolmas nod. I triggered the emergency bar. It sang. The Concord mark, Erath said. His voice made the word like a wine he didn't drink. A Lure bond between our princess and a human guard. A rote laugh would have been easier. A scandal would have been safer. The court did neither. They stared because old prophecies are fun until they land in your breakfast. Selene lifted her hand. The constellation shone. My people believe the mark is not romance. It is resonance. It burns when a bridge is found between peoples, between ideas. It chose an inconvenient human. That is a thing it would do. Tolmas swallowed. So what? We hold hands and space stops falling apart. No one answered because they were not fools. Alarms did. They rang with a politeness that made the hair raise on Tolmas's arms. Shirin looked to the ceiling. Port, spikes on the lattice, said a voice too calm to be at peace. A binding net on our outer arcs. Someone is seeding stillness. Visual. The stars outside the glass drew lines between themselves, not constellations, cages. Hooks sank into the lattice, invisible until you stared wrong. A slow drag pulled at Vigil's spine. Shirin pointed. Cut power to the promenade. Reroute to the station shuddered as if held by a giant with opinions. Someone was already here. Calth Veyer stepped into Vigil like a saint arriving late to his own sermon. He wore a suit that had never seen grease and a smile that had only ever known mirrors. The guards at his back moved in silence because of course they did. Their boots absorbed offense. He opened his hands. At last, the princess, the admiral, the human. I do love it when a tableau arranges itself. Shirin didn't offer a hand. Explain the lattice. Jury-rigged by exhausted engineers, ruled by rules so paranoid they went feral, held together by promises. He sighed. You cannot leave peace to amateurs. Peace. Erath spat. Don't spit, he learned. You're binding the stars. I am holding the stage still, Calth said, so the audience does not miss the lines. Knock it off, Tomas said. We don't perform for you. Calth's smile gazed at Tomas like he was an endearing stain. No, you perform for her. He turned to Selene. Princess, when your mark glows, you are a conduit. Your people's songs, humanity's grit, that derelict ring, the seraph gate. It opens for the Concord, for destiny, for ratings. Selene's face closed. You would make a cage out of a wedding. Not a wedding, Calth said, sleeker than he deserved. A coronation. He touched a ring. His men moved quiet, precise, like knives in a drawer a child should never open. Tomas shot first. No speech. No flourish. A clean burst. The first guard dropped. 2 others flinched just enough to reveal they still knew they were mortal. Sheeran rolled a table over like a shield. Erath moved as if his bones had been oiled by generations of professional worry. Selene didn't duck. She ran, not away, forward. Her palms slapped the floor and the mark lit the wood like sunrise through rain. The chamber responded with a bass note. The station's long memory flexed. Lights died where they should. Doors slammed where they needed to. Calth's men lost the stage because the stage had chosen a new director. Move, Sheeran barked. They did, through the galleries where treaties had been signed with pens that later stabbed someone anyway, down the service spine where pipes clicked like teeth, across the docking spoke where a mural of a whale ship looked down on them with the patience of old things. Calth's voice pursued. He didn't shout. He let the station carry him. You cannot run far. The lattice holds. The gate calls. The galaxy needs an ending. Give it one. In the elevator, Tomas reloaded. Erath bled from the forearm and pretended he didn't. Selene stood with her hand on the panel, feeding it trust. The mark's light leaked down metal like dew. Tomas said, "You okay?" She didn't answer for a breath. When she did, the truth clicked in the space between them. "No, good, me neither. Does it help? All the time." The doors opened on the dark. The southern docking ring. Their ship, Selene's envoy craft, grown from song and metal, slept in its cradle. Human tugs hunched nearby like tired bulldogs. Out in the bay, starlight pooled and trembled under the net. A figure stood between them and the airlock. Calth Veyer didn't need oxygen. He had so much of other people's breath stored up that stars inhaled when he walked by. "Princess," he said, "give me your hand." "No, you misunderstand." His smile didn't move. That was not a request. He flicked his ring. The air above them turned to glass. Tomas felt pressure in his jaw. Erath grunted, knees buckling, not from gravity, from silence. Calth was taking sound away in strips so that even their bones forgot how to sing to themselves. Selene stepped forward. The mark seethed under her skin. "You cannot have what I do not give." Calth tilted his head. "You gave it when you touched that man. The universe noticed. You will notice too." He reached. Tomas reached faster. His fingers found Selene's wrist. He knew better. Touching royalty without permission gets you thrown out of airlocks on fancy days. He did it anyway. The mark exploded into day. Sound cracked like a spine releasing. The net above the bay thrummed. Old machinery, the kind polite people had forgotten was alive, sat up. The seraph gate woke. It was a ring carved by a civilization that had loved metaphor too much and died for it. It had drifted for centuries among pretty museums. It had learned not to wake for cries. It woke for convergence. Selene felt something move under her skin, through bone and brain and all the places that pretend they are not part of the same city. Tomas felt it too, the way soldiers feel storms. The gate felt it most. It turned its face toward Vigil like a cat turning toward a friend's palm. Calth stumbled. He recovered and laughed, and the laugh had teeth. "Yes, yes, very good. Now walk through, princess. Take your human, take your admiral, lead us. The stars will hold still for you. I will hold the stars still for everyone." Selene breathed in. The mark burned. Tomas saw pain behind her eyes that had nothing to do with flesh and everything to do with choosing a road while watching 1,000 roads kneel. "I won't," she said. "Won't." Calth blinked. You think choice matters. You think refusing makes you clean. Refusal is still choreography. Selene smiled, small and sharp. Not when refusal is building a different stage. She turned to Tomas. May I? He nodded. Take what you need. She took his hand. Two species met and something older than either of them took notes. Light poured out of their palms, not blazing, steadfast. The envoy craft woke to its name. The human tugs shook themselves like dogs given a purpose again. The bay doors rolled, stubborn as old men standing to dance. The seraph gate aligned. Calth snarled. The polite peeled away. You don't understand. I give the galaxy what it craves, certainty, a story that ends. Selene stepped backward into the ship, pulling Tomas with her. Stories don't end, they make room. Calth raised his hand. In it, a small sphere, a stillness seed. If it bloomed, the bay would become a painting and they'd be trapped like insects varnished over. Tomas shot it. He didn't think. He had trained for the seconds before thinking. The sphere shattered. Silence howled, and the howl turned into sound again, and then into wind, and then into something that remembered being a choir and changed its mind. The envoy's core answered the mark. It took them. Through the gate, into the old corridors where stars are numbers and numbers are rooms and rooms are choices. The ship did not fly. It remembered. It moved by memory between places where memory is registered like currency. Outside, humanity's scars and the lure's songs braided. The seraph gate smiled for the first time since it had been left, and that smile was the shape of a path. They burst into the drift of echoes, a graveyard of ships that had fought during the first quiet and never learned how to speak again. Hulks drifted like teeth in a dragon's jaw. Calth followed. Of course he did. Broken things called to men like him. Selene's hands glowed on the console. Her voice was not words. It was permission. Ships in the dark shivered and stopped trying to die so loudly. Tomas's fingers danced weapons he didn't fire yet. Erath muttered prayers into his sleeve and pretended they were diagnostics. Sheeran's orders came thin through the passage, vigil under siege, human crews holding lines with rope and jokes. Calth's ship tore reality like cloth grown cheap. He arrived with a choir that had never eaten a decent meal. It sang subtraction. Princess, he said through every channel, your walk is almost admirable. Stop. Let me help. This is larger than love. This is not love, Selene said. It's a bridge. He scoffed. Bridges are built to be witnessed. Tomas fed power to the shields. He talks like a commercial. Because he is one, Selene said. Calth flung seeds. The seeds ate motion. Hulks locked into place like rigid jaws. The envoy slowed. An old cruiser drifted across their bow. A human ship, teeth marks on its hull. A name on its side barely readable through scars. Polaris Mercy. Her lights flickered the way old bar signs do. Open, closed, trying to decide if hope is still a product you can stock. Selene reached for her. The mark touched metal. The cruiser answered, not with engines, with story. A security feed. A last message. A captain in a stained uniform singing a lullaby into a microphone so her crew would have something to die to. That was not silence. A set of coordinates. A warning whispered like a bedtime kiss. Do not let them sell you an ending they can own. Tomas swallowed. Copy. The envoy slid beneath the cruiser's ruined ribs. Calth's ship bore down, grinning with its sensors. He wanted his scene. He deserved to be denied it. Now Sheeran's voice crackled. We can hear you. We can see you, princess. If you can open the gate anywhere, open it over vigil. Bring the graveyard down on his head. Selene's hands shook. If I do, you'll fill our sky with ghosts, Sheeran said. We'll make kitchens. We'll feed them peace. Erath blinked at Sheeran, surprised into admiration. Human admiral, he whispered, you terrify me. Good, Sheeran said, means I'm alive. Selene breathed. Tomas anchored her with the simplest of anchors, watching, steady, unafraid to see her fear. Her mark became a constellation again, then a compass. The gate answered, not the museum ring, not the staged arch Calth held like a leash. 1,000 microgates in the bones of the drift, forgotten doors, maintenance hatches between realities, exits meant for fire drills. They open like eyes waking from a good nap. The envoy sang. The graveyard moved. Ships long dead turned, respectful. They followed the tone old fighters follow when a whistle blows in a flood, and it's the right whistle and the right flood. They reached for vigil across the corridor. The stars took a breath and poured. Calth swore, and it sounded wrong on him. No, no, not like this. Not with mess, not with strangers. You ruined the line. Good, Tolmas said and fired. The choir screamed and broke. Calth's hull shuddered under weaponry he had thought outdated. The envoy didn't aim to kill. It aimed to distract. Erath tagged coordinates with swears that were technically weather reports. Sheeran yanked the station's remaining power into magnets. Vigil lit the sky. Spools the size of cathedrals woke. Grav coils howled. The air curled. The seraph stream, the river of borrowed memory, swept the drift toward the station with the inevitability of holidays. Calth tried to wrench stillness around them. He tried to turn the flood into a painting again. Selene closed her eyes and reached outward past what was lur and human and royal and poor. Come, she whispered. You can't whisper in space. You can't breathe air between stars. You can, you do, you always have, because voices are choices given air. The ships heard, they obeyed, they fell toward Vigil not as weapons, as witnesses. They punched through the net and tore it into ribbons. Ribbons can be tied into bows, these shredded into thread. Calth's siege ships snatched at hulls and caught stories that didn't like being trapped. The stories escaped. They crawled down wires and sang into microphones and laughed at cameras until cameras remembered they were mirrors at best. The envoy burst through the gate into Vigil's sky. Vigil looked up like a city being proposed to. Sheeran's coils tugged the graveyard into a slow orbit. Engines with no fuel remembered duty. AI cores like autumn leaves caught in rain gutters rattled themselves clean. Kitchens flared to life, human and lur, because any flood ending with people alive involves soup. Calth's ship followed, scarred now, offended the way expensive things are when reality doesn't offer them a seat. He aimed his quiet at the station's heart. Selene stepped onto the envoy's ramp. The mark lit the air. She stood above the docking ring with Tolmas beside her, Erath one step back, Sheeran below with eyes like knives made to cut rope. Calth hovered like an unwanted idea. The speakers on Vigil's spine crackled. His voice tried to become scripture. People of Vigil, he said, be reasonable. The lattice requires control. The concord requires ceremony. Your princess is a door. Your guard is a key. I am the lock that keeps you safe. Tolmas lifted his rifle. He lowered it. He lifted his voice instead. No, he said. The word rolled out like a boulder turned conversational. It bounced off hulls and walked through windows and sat in laps. People listened because it was not spinning. It was heavy and true and tired. We do not end because you need an ending, Tolmas said. We do not freeze because you like still pictures. Selene spoke. She did not amplify. She did not shout. She let the mark carry the tone, low, clear, the sound of a cup set down and a hand offered. We will not be choreographed, she said. We will not be fed into a story you can own. We open kitchens. We open corridors. We will walk without permission and share maps without consulting your stage manager. The graveyard circled Vigil like old gods deciding to retire and take up gardening. People on balconies cried and did not hide it. People at consoles stopped pretending they were not afraid and did their jobs better for the honesty. The Lagardes watched their princess defy a market and discovered it was their favorite war. Calth smiled, a cracked thing now. It doesn't matter. People tire of nuance. They crave spectacle. They will crawl to me for an end. Sheeran lifted her wrist. It glowed with a light that wasn't lur and wasn't human, station-born Vigil's voice at last. Not today, she said. Fire. The coils fired, not bullets, not beams, truth, a pulse of field that deleted stillness. Calth's hull screamed as physics returned without asking. His choir choked, his net dissolved, his ship fled, leaking ego. He left behind cameras. Selene nodded to the salvage crews. Collect them, melt them, make bowls. They did. In the days that followed, Vigil changed professions. It stopped being a stage and started being a port. The graveyard ships docked and disgorged their dead. The dead were not bodies, they were stories. They became anchors and songs, pipes and stories told while bolts were tightened. The seraph gate hovered above like a promise you kept without bragging. Selene and Tomas walked Vigil together. Sometimes they were guards, sometimes they were royalty. Often they were hands carrying crates, steadying ladders, holding each other without spectacle. Her mark never stopped glowing when he touched her. Not bright, not demanding. A steady lantern. People asked if it meant love. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it meant work. The good kind. On a high spine where Vigil's view turned aliens into neighbors, Selene and Sheeran and Erath and Tomas watched the drift revolve like a patient animal choosing to trust. Kitchens birthed steam. Mechanics birthed miracles. Lurin human songs misheard each other and created harmonies neither would have dared alone. What now? Tomas asked. Now, Sheeran said, we write the boring parts, the checklists, the covenants. The rules for who fixes what, who eats first, who sleeps while who watches. We tell the galaxy that we're building habits so no one can sell us a climax again. Erath nodded slowly. We keep the mark as a signal, not of romance, of duty. Selene took Tomas's hand and looked down at the city that had almost been a theater and had chosen a port. We keep walking, she said. Calth Vayer did not die. Men like him don't. They fade to podcasts no one admits they listen to. They sell souvenirs of endings that never happened. Occasionally they show up at doors and are handed a bowl and a sponge and told to wash up or leave. The lattice began to knit itself. Not by decree but by habit. Gates woke to marks that were friendships and pacts and marriages, and sometimes the handshake between a human who fixed air conditioners and a lure who grew beams from seeds. The war of silent stars did not end in a blast of trumpets. It ended the way winter ends in good towns, with salt on the steps, with neighbors at the railings, with kitchens. On the night Vigil dimmed its exterior lights for the first time in months, the graveyard ships hummed a lullaby. Tiny boats ferried bowls of stew between hull and home. Children fell asleep to the sound of old reactors finally spinning down. Tomas and Selene stood alone on a quiet balcony. He looked at her wrist. Does it ever hurt? She turned her hand, watched the constellation move like a living map. Sometimes. It is heavy when we are pulled different ways, but when we stand still, together, it doesn't hurt. We won't always get to stand still, he said. We won't, she agreed. We will choose anyway. He kissed the edge of the mark. The light warmed and settled like a cat finally allowed a lap. We should sleep, he said. In a moment, she said, they watched the stars. They were not silent anymore. They didn't shout. They breathed. And that day, the galaxy learned humanity doesn't conquer, it endures. Headphone, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi tales. Until next time, stay human, stay unbroken. You said, NHI 1 part ma du kia drama, KR Rai Ho Yar Agar 2 part Lani Hodi, to ma free virgin use KR let a chat GPT said. Clapper board, you're about to hear an original HFY sci-fi tale titled The War of Silent Stars. The alien princess froze when her soulmate mark glowed after touching a human guard. HFY story. Find a quiet spot, put on your headphones, and let the stars fall silent. If you enjoy cinematic sci-fi narrations, consider subscribing for more. Now we begin. Vigil Station learned to breathe again the night the lattice went quiet. It began with a flicker in the beacon spines, those old lighthouse towers that sang the routes between suns. One by one their voices thinned like candles losing their courage. Freight lanes blinked out. Patrol hymns dropped to whispers. Even the friendly noise of commerce, bargaining, and laughter piped over public channels fell to hush. The silence was not empty, it listened. They called it the War of Silent Stars because this enemy didn't break things first. It turned sound into a net and used every word as a hook. Admirals learned to whisper. Pilots learned to fly by heartbeat. Shrines turned their bells inward. On the southern lock, under a strip of emergency light, a human guard waited with a rifle that had seen 3 wars and the inside of 2 kitchens. He stood easy, like men stand when they have spent more years upright than curled. Gray armor, patched by loving hands. Name strip, Tomas Reyes. He watched the black, not for movement, for intention. A ripple touched Vigil's docking field. A shuttle drifted in sleek and bright, hull veined like a leaf in sunlight. As it set down, the air tasted clean like rain after dust. The lure had arrived. They came from cities grown out of coral glass and memory. They didn't build ships so much as teach metal how to remember its shape. Their guards wore woven light. They didn't step, they arranged the floor beneath them, but over the gleam and grace practical plates had been strapped. Even beauty armors itself when silence becomes teeth. At the center of the procession, under a canopy that breathed in colors, walked Princess Selene of the Lure. She was not tall, but gravity respected her. She wore no crown. The corridors wore it for her. Along the inside of her left wrist, visible through skin like sea glass, lay a dormant constellation. The Lure called it the Concord Mark. Old songs said it burned only once, and only for the touch that could change the fate of 2 peoples without breaking either. Tomas raised a hand. "Welcome to Vigil, Princess. Lattice is unstable. We're running tight procedures. Palms on the plate, please." Her eyes were deep-water calm. "You keep your station with humility. I respect that." "Humility's cheaper than ammunition, ma'am." "Selene," she corrected without looking away. He swallowed, nodded, set the scanner to handshake. As she reached for the plate, her fingers brushed his. Every light in the corridor dimmed like an audience holding its breath. Her wrist flared, not soft, not shy. The constellation under her skin erupted into a star held captive. The glow climbed her forearm in a pattern old songs had tried to draw and failed because paper doesn't move. Guards froze. Humans held exhalations in their teeth. Somewhere deeper in the station, an ancient relay woke and whispered "oh" to itself. The captain of her guard, a blade of a man named Erath, stepped forward with fury disguised as etiquette. "Your Highness," Selene's gaze never left Tomas. "Stand down." "Princess this." "Stand down." The corridor learned how to be a room again. Erath lowered his hand, hilt still warm with the thought of it. Tomas took his palm away from the scanner. The glow softened but did not sleep. "What does it mean?" he asked. He didn't pretend to know the myths. He had learned in a dozen ports that asking saves more lives than guessing. Selene opened and closed her hand as if her bones had become an orchestra tuning. For a beat she looked far away, into a heritage that had not asked her permission to live in her. It means the old songs were not entirely poetry. She lifted an eyebrow at his armor. "It also means you just complicated my life, Tomas Reyes." "Add it to my tab," he said, "because humor is courage when you can't afford the expensive kind." The station's admiral waited in the audience chamber. Shirin Voss, a woman who had earned the right to speak softly. She stood with human officers in patched blues and engineers with grease under their nails. Nobles glittered opposite, bands of woven light along their forearms, faces composed into courtly mirrors. The chamber table had been grown from a seed that remembered mountains. Selene set her hands on it. The mark illuminated the wood grain. Tomas felt the floor hum like a cat deciding a lap was worthy. Shirin got to the point. "Princess Selene, our lattice is failing. The beacon spines don't sing the way they used to. Our scouts say it's not decay, it's interference." She touched a panel. Windows bloomed in the air, ships caught in slow drifts, jump arcs curdled from fields into film. Someone is listening too hard. Selene nodded, the silence choir. The name tasted like stale incense. A regent who adores the stage, HFY. He sells certainty to princes terrified of nuance. He binds jumplight with stillness seeds and broadcasts order. Shiren's jaw clenched. He's netting the stars. Erath's lip did something too impolite to be called a curl. He'll want the princess. He'll want the gate. Tomas frowned. The what now? Selene's fingers tensed. The seraph gate. A ring our ancestors built when metaphor outran wisdom. It answers the Concord mark. It's been dormant since we grew up. Shiren's next window showed a derelict museum ring drifting over nothing. It was beautiful and useless the way a harp is beautiful in a thunderstorm. 2 hours ago this thing, she pointed, opened a petal. Something on vigil sang a note it liked. Tomas and Selene shared a look neither of them had earned yet. Our palms, he said. My mark, she said. The ceiling lights trembled. The air tightened. Erath's hand found his hilt again. Shiren's found a switch. HFY didn't knock. He arrived on vigil with a smile like a signature, walking between guards who wore silence like taxidermy. He dressed in fabric that implied expense without committing to taste. Cameras hovered behind him, tiny glass flies with opinions. Admiral Princess, human. He nodded as if naming a painting. At last, all our leads on one stage. Shiren did not play. Explain your net. Safety net, he corrected, dignified. The lattice is a frayed rope. Do you want children falling into vacuum? I offer rails, handholds, a choreography of peace. Selene's eyes cooled. Peace doesn't need a choreographer. Kalth smiled wider. Peace requires a brand. He turned to Tomas with a pitying tilt. You'll understand, you people have always loved a flag. Erath stepped. Tomas glanced at the hilt and then at Erath's jaw, and that was enough for the lure to read. Not yet. The mark on Selene's wrist pulsed in time with Tomas's heart. Kalth's gaze tracked it like a collector deciding where to hang a stolen painting. The gate woke, Kalth said. When her mark touched his hand, the choir heard, so did the galaxy. It craves an ending, princess. Give them one, give them us. Cameras edged closer. Shiren flicked her hand. Steel shutters dropped. The cameras blinked in the face of very old metal. Kalth's smile thinned to a paper cut. I insist, he said softly. I refuse, Selene said softer. Kalth flicked a ring. The air in Tomas's mouth turned heavy. Sound bled out through holes he couldn't see. Beside him, engineers cupped ears that couldn't hear. Kalth was draining the room of voice. Tomas shot the ring. He didn't aim at the man, he aimed at the tool. The ring shattered. Sound fell back into the room like rain through drought. The guards moved. Erath's blade drank its permission. Shiren rolled the mountain table like a shield. Selene slapped her palm to the floor. The station answered. Lights died where they should for friends. Doors slammed in strangers' faces. The floor hummed a tone only those without cameras could stand. Kalth's men stumbled. Kalth recovered with a hush so sharp it cut a rail in two. Run, Shiren said, which is a command that saves worlds when spoken by someone who knows when to hold and when to move. They ran, through the treaty hall where pens had once pretended to be swords, down the spine where pipes clicked like teeth deciding not to bite. Selene's mark guided the station like a hand on the small of a back. Tomas's rifle argued with corners trying to be traps. Erath bled and pretended not to. Shiren made calm a weapon. They burst into the southern ring. Selene's envoy ship slept in its cradle, metal remembered into grace. Human tugs squatted like bulldogs who'd bite gravity if it misbehaved. Above the docking doors, the stars were no longer stars. The lattice lines had been drawn into cages. Hooks bit Vigil's arc. The world strained in place like a dancer nailed by her toes. Kalth stood between them and the airlock. He wasn't out of breath. Men like him hire oxygen to do their panting. "Princess," he said and opened a hand. "You don't have time to flinch." She didn't flinch. She took Tomas's hand. Her mark became a sunrise. The envoy's bones woke like a horse remembering the road. The human tugs shook dust from their hearts. The docking doors groaned, old men getting up to dance because the band finally played the right song. Calth's eyes widened and the plastic in his composure softened. He pulled a small sphere from his pocket, a stillness seed, black and smug. Tomas shot it midair. It cracked like a lie told twice. They launched. The envoy kissed vacuum with practiced gratitude. The gate, far above, turned its long neck toward them like a heron deciding to trust. The lattice groaned but parted. The world stretched thin and then became a corridor. They entered the drift of echoes, a graveyard of ships that had died when silence first learned to feed. Hulks floated like teeth in a giant jaw. Names scarred their sides: Polaris Mercy, Stoneback, Nomad's Grace, the Laughing Star. Ghost lights blinked like tired eyes. Calth followed, his ship peeling space with money. His choir sang subtraction, notes that taught motion to reconsider itself. He wasn't trying to kill them, he was setting a scene. Selene stood at the envoy's heart, the mark mapped. She reached into the drift with a tone half-human, half-lure, all stubborn. Old hulls shivered. Many had carried children once. Many remembered lullabies. One answered. A human cruiser spun slowly, a bite taken out of her waist. Polaris Mercy. Selene touched a console, the mark reached the ship's bones. A last captain's log crawled into the room, a woman in a stained uniform, eyes unashamed. "If anyone hears this, don't let them sell you an ending. We don't do endings, we do dinners and chores and long jokes." Tomas's throat hurt. "Copy," he whispered, and the ship heard and steadied. "Sheeran," Selene said into a corridor of static. Vigil's voice came thin and strong. "Here. We can open the gate," Selene said. "Not the big one, the little doors, the maintenance hatches between real things." Sheeran smiled into her microphone, the kind of smile you hear. "Do it, bring our dead home, we'll feed them." Selene closed her eyes. It wasn't prayer, it was permission. The mark hummed. Microgates cracked like ice under sunrise. The drift stirred, the way a town stirs when the right song floats through a window. Hulls turned, not toward battle, toward belonging. Calth panicked the way only a man panics when a crowd refuses to clap. He threw nets of stillness. He pitched spheres like seeds of winter. Selene lifted Tomas's hand higher, the envoy's heart pushed. Grace moved. They fell toward Vigil like rain escaping a painting. The station's coils, spools the size of modest cathedrals, woke with a groan. Sheeran guided with magnets and curses. Engines that had forgotten themselves remembered under gentle hands. Kitchens lit for the first time in years. Pots argued with old recipes. People cried and blamed the steam. They burst back into Vigil's sky. Calth arrived behind them, caged and furious. He opened the public speakers, the station cut them, and he opened them again with money. "People of Vigil," he crooned, "be reasonable. The lattice must be controlled. The gate must be curated. The princess is our door. The human is our key. I am your lock." Tomas lowered his rifle and lifted his voice. No, it rolled out honest and heavy. You can't amplify that kind of word with machinery. It wears its own weight. "We will not be staged," he said. "We will not be sold." Selene stood beside him on the envoy's ramp, Mark casting a steady lantern light. "We will build a port, not a theater. We'll write habits, not headlines. We'll open corridors and kitchens and clinics. If you need certainty, try kindness. It repeats better than applause." Calth sneered. "This is quaint. The galaxy wants a clean ending." Sheeran lifted her wrist. Vigil answered her with a glow station-born light. "We prefer a competent beginning, fire." The coils fired a pulse that ate stillness and spat motion. Calth's nets shredded. His choir coughed on air and remembered it was mortal. He fled, leaking narrative. He left cameras behind. Selene nodded at salvage crews. "Melt them, make bowls." They did. The weeks that followed were the most dangerous after the fireworks when boredom returns and tyrants sell spectacle dressed as purpose. Vigil refused. It declared itself a port of habit. Rules went up: who docked first, the damaged; who ate first, the tired; who slept first, the ones who kept strangers safe. The Lure brought seeds for beams and songs for hulls. Humans brought wrenches and coffee and jokes that outlived coffee. Selene and Tolmas moved through it not as a ballad, but as hands. They carried crates. They fixed air as if it were a marriage. They learned the names of tugs like neighbors. Sometimes they touched, her wrist lighting, his breath steadying, and people didn't gawp. They smiled the way you smile at lanterns. Erath drilled Lure guards in the art of human improvisation, and in return Tolmas learned Lure blade etiquette, which mostly involved not apologizing to steal when you used it. Shirin wrote the boring covenant, 32 pages of checklists and chores that kept Vigil honest. She made captains sign it. She made priests sign it twice. She hung it in the mess. The drift of echoes circled Vigil like an old god choosing to retire as a gardener. Microgates bloomed, small and sensible. Little ships ferried broth and blankets, bolts and bedtime stories. Printers clicked out manuals. Kids raced wheeled carts down maintenance corridors and pretended they were fighters. No one told them not to pretend. Pretending is how real things stretch. Calth Vayer did not die. Men like him learned to monetize their own defeats. He hosted shows from far stations with names like The Quiet Hour and Destiny and Discipline. He promised endings, clean ones with orchestra swells and dresses. He sold replicas of the Seraph Gate that didn't open anything. But every time he spoke, images of bowls appeared in the corners of screens, Vigil's bowls made from melted cameras. People ate while his voice tried to make hunger look pretty. Hunger prefers competence. He returned once, cloaked in charities and velvet. He tried to buy a gate with kindness he'd rented. He wore a smile that had been polished by hands no one paid enough. Selene met him on the spine with Tolmas and Shirin. She had not put on a crown, she never would. "You can leave bowls," she said. "You can take nothing." Calth gestured at Tolmas's hand in hers. "The galaxy thinks you are lovers." Tolmas shrugged. Sometimes, always comrades, often tired. Calth turned to the cameras he had snuck in as if they were children caught with paint. They refused to acknowledge him. Vigil hummed a small tune the cameras liked better. He went away. He would always be around the way mold is always around. That's why kitchens have soap and sunlight. Years stacked like well-washed plates. Vigil's port lists filled with names that had learned to be neighbors. The Keyleth sails like mica unfurled. A Phoric hive fragment that had lost its moons and found a purpose. An Atron shard cruiser that set its gravity to polite and its pride to low. An admiral retired and began teaching pipe fitting to princes. A monk opened a shop that sold screws and advice. Selene and Tolmas made a habit of the same balcony. It overlooked the coils and the drift and the small boats that crossed between in the easy, constant dance of maintenance. They stood there when storms built and when stars came close to remember themselves. "Does it ever stop?" Tolmas asked one late watch, chin stubbled, shoulders sore, heart quiet. Selene looked at her wrist. The constellation shone as if a cat had finally found a lap and intended to keep it. "The mark, it dims when you sleep. It brightens when you do something brave. It aches when you're about to be foolish. Handy. Impertinent," she said, and kissed the corner of his mouth where a laugh had once been born. "The lattice, it will always need tending. There will always be someone selling stillness. We will keep them too busy washing bowls to sell anything that sticks." Below, kitchens steamed. Coil techs ate with bow-armed guards. Jokes traveled faster than orders. A littler girl, hair braided with copper wire, carried a bolt almost as big as her arm across a walkway. A human boy held the other end and refused to be outdone. They didn't speak the same first language, they spoke effort. The Seraph Gate hung above like a promise you keep without posting about it. Vigil's motto changed on the station boards. Once it had read, Fortress. Then, Free Port. Now it read, Quiet Habits. People laughed and rolled their eyes and signed duty rosters. When the storm finally came, the big one, the one every kitchen quietly prepares for, it did not begin as invasion. It began as a rumor so slick you could skate it. A new gate has been discovered, true this time, clean, curated by a neutral council. The logo was nice. The fonts were disciplined. Calth stood at the unveiling in a softer suit. He had learned to pose near potters and firefighters. The cameras lingered on his humility. The gate behind him glittered like a promise that never learned about mornings. Vigil sent no fleet. It sent 3 tugs, a Lerquire, and a portable kitchen. Selene and Tomas rode a tug with Sheeran. Eraith brought a first aid kit and a sword. The tugs arrived in low orbit over a new-built ring where no ring should have had the gall to be. Lines of silent ships, eager for a curated ending, fidgeted in queue. Calth bowed. Princess, Admirable Admiral, Tired Man. Tomas grinned, nice to be known. Calth spread a hand at the gate. Fully compliant, drama-free, certified in 9 languages, join us, sign the quiet compact. No improvisation, no accidents, no unplanned people. Selene walked forward and placed her palm on the polished threshold. Her mark didn't glow. The gate didn't open. Silence stretched, a rope waiting to be cut. She turned, looking at Calth the way ocean looks at sand castles. You built a door that refuses messy feet. We built standards, he said, sweating only in his cuticles. We built kitchens, she said, and nodded. Sheeran set up a long table in the shadow of the ring. She unfolded benches. She plugged in kettles. The choir hummed a scale that smelled like basil and obligation. Tomas hung a sign that read, No shoes, no shirt, no peace. Come eat anyway. People came, not because of speeches, because the stew was hot and the bowls were clean and the laughter was tired like theirs. Calth watched a line form in front of a kitchen instead of a gate. Panic nibbled his dignity. A Phoric matriarch slithered up. She wore an apron. She had seen battles. She had carried eggs. She tasted the soup and nodded. Needs pepper. A prince guarded the pepper and learned to share. A pirate guarded the line and learned to say please. Calth raised his hands, calling cameras that didn't come. Selene raised nothing. She ladled. The gate stayed closed. The kitchen stayed open. The crowd drifted away from the polished promise and toward the sensible table. Calth left, offering refunds no one asked for. His ring was decommissioned. It became washers and spoons. The lattice breathed easier. The war did not end that day or any day. Wars that are made of silence end by erosion, by habit, by the small brave acts of refusing to sell your fear and refusing to buy someone else's easy end. Years later, a child asked on the balcony, Princess, is he your soulmate? Selene smiled down at the small boy whose hands were oil and sugar. She looked at Tomas, who was arguing with a bolt and losing with grace. She lifted her wrist. The mark shone. He is my co-worker, she said. He is my comrade. He is my love when there is bread and when there isn't. He is my stubborn. He is my soft. The mark glowed when we decided to build a bridge instead of a throne. The child nodded like he understood everything and nothing. He ran off to race a cart. Selene leaned into Tomas's shoulder. You still complicated my life, guard. He smiled. Put it on my tab. Paid, she said. Above them, the Seraph Gate kept its year-long promise to stay open only for work, never for spectacle. Below them, Vigil's quiet habits made noise that mattered, laughter, clanks, songs that didn't mind being off-key. Calth Veyer recorded one last episode in a room with a bowl on the table. He tried to talk the bowl into applause. It refused gently. He went to a smaller station and tried to sell curtains to Vacuum. Vacuum didn't need curtains. It needed engineers. Vigil's beacons found their voices again, not songs of conquest, but songs you hum at a sink while washing someone else's spoon because it's the right kind of tired. The lattice knitted not by decree, but by the work of hands that had learned to hold and let go without cameras. The stars did not go silent again. They learned to breathe. And that day the galaxy learned humanity doesn't conquer, it endures. Headphone, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi tales. Until next time, stay human, stay unbroken.